So this is just to remind them that there are 15 ways to give their power and influence away. And today we look at 1 to 8. So we already know that women can be really uncomfortable with recognizing their power, and some women can really shrink back from it completely, believing they just don't have any. So from one of the workshops one of our delegates have done in the UK, one lady said, "I didn't realise I had any power until today." And that's just the most massive statement I think somebody could make. And we want to get them really thinking about the fact that they do have power and that they can use it authentically and with their own personality, you know, that they don't have to give it away, that they can be reminded of how they might be giving it away without even realising it, and how some women have bought into this thing about being overly masculine in case of, you know, they can really match their male counterparts, but they can do that by being really their own energy about that. We don't have to be them. We don't have to do it a male way. And I know we're generalising hugely into male and female ways of behaving, but it is true that I know some women who have really felt that they've had to step up that aggressiveness in order to match that of their counterparts. And when they realise that there is a way that they can do that with their own personality that feels really like it fits, all of a sudden the penny drops. And I really wanted to put Joanne's quote in here, you know, in the film that we made, The 10 Things You Need to Know to Love Yourself Today. Joanne was one of the stars of that film. And to really understand them, to lean into a version of their own feminine power, which means that they are able to step into their element authentically and without apology. And I really couldn't have said it any better or come up with a better phrase. So Joanne's had to go in there because that was just perfect. And you're going to get the ladies around the room to score themselves currently now at the beginning of how comfortable they actually feel describing themselves as powerful, and also what powerful women need to look, feel and act like. So this is really interesting because if you put a scale of 1 to 5, it's really easy for somebody to put a 3 and be completely in the middle, right? But we want a kind of, are you on that side of the fence or are you on this side of the fence? So 4 gets rid of that entirely. We've had women say none on this course before, and we've had women start off with 4. And initially, the ones that started off with 4, we thought, wow, they don't even need to be on the course. That's really brilliant. But then at the end of the course, they've gone down in terms of power, which was really interesting for us because the first thought was, oh my God, it hasn't worked. They feel less powerful than they did before. That's not great. But this lady explained to me it's only happened once, and she said, now I understand true power, and now I have to cultivate that for myself, and that is far less than the bravado I have put on, and now I really need to work on me. And that was just so powerful. So it doesn't actually matter what the score is. For them, it's a very personal thing, and actually everybody goes up. You know, there's been that one time where somebody's gone down, but in actual fact, I think 99% of women that I've ever put through this course have gone up and felt more powerful at the end of this. So if you're going to talk about power, I thought we should probably look up what it actually means. So I looked up in the dictionary, and this is what it means. We have words here like dominant, forceful, authoritarian, commanding, controlling, upper hand, wicked. Like, I just could not believe what I was reading, but it's absolutely true, and it's no wonder that women don't feel associated with that word power. There were only what I would describe as female-centric words, just 2 female-centric words that I found, is that women feel more aligned with. Those are the types of words that we tend to feel like they belong to us, and that was capable and competent. But the rest were actually really quite harmful, I think, and damaging. So it's no wonder women don't want to be seen as powerful. And it starts here, you know, that really alpha male power thing, but it's been blown out by the media, of course. And our experience of seeing those alpha males use and abuse their power in some of the very worst ways, we see it on the news, we might have had experience of it ourselves. But typically that really aggressive, overly competitive, ambitious side that can come out from that male ego to the detriment of others really makes us want to reject that word. But there's no need to reject it, because we can cultivate it in a way that feels really good to us. And here's how we do it. So women in general prefer a very equal network of power. So we don't like that hierarchical stuff as much. We like power to be distributed. Often our ambition is not linked to treading on somebody else, but rather linked to a purpose, that we want to change something, that we are driven in some cause or other. And typically women are far more concerned with empowering others rather than being forcible leaders. And boy, is your personal feminine power really needed. You know, your strength is needed, and I'm talking to you, facilitator, as well as how you deliver this. Your strength is needed here. Your belief in yourself is needed. Your core inner trust in yourself is absolutely needed. And it's a deep, very special and completely unique set of personal power values to you. Little girls need to see these values as the new norm. Then we can start to make change. So this film is what we show people, and it's really a demonstration of what happens in the world and really highlights some really important things for us to think about. So I would usually just play this video and then ask people for like one word or a short sentence about their reaction to it. Now, some women are very shocked by it, and others are absolutely not shocked by it and rather numbed by it. You know, they've seen it so often, they just see it as normal, which is as equally as worrying as having it hit you in the face and being really shocked about it. So it's an interesting discussion point, and there's no right or wrong answers as to how people should feel, but it's nice to have a bit of a roundup before you continue and carry on. So this is the second way that women give their power away, and it's really when taken to an extreme, but actually many of us take it to an extreme without actually realizing. So women like to be liked, and what happens sometimes when we like to be liked is we will do favors for others. We'll go out of our way for others. You know, it goes past being friendly and accommodating, although that's what we do. But it's a bit more about being compliant and, you know, flexible, but sometimes overly flexible to the detriment of ourselves. And what we find is that women end up doing things that they would really rather not do, or they promised to do once, and now it seems to have turned into a regular thing, and now they don't know how to get out of it. And, you know, the risk is that we end up being coined by other people as sort of an errand runner, or, you know, they can take liberties with us, or we won't say no, or we'll do anything for them, or we can be easily manipulated. The point is, if you overuse the whole women like to be liked thing, you can be seen as not as important as somebody else. It really can go completely against you. So this slide is to really highlight that to women and get them thinking about what it means to them. So you might like to partition your group into pairs and get them talking or thinking for 5 minutes, just a short thing, about how important is it to them that they're liked, and when does it work for them and when does it work against them? Because I think sometimes it can work for us, and sometimes it's great to help somebody. I've helped people before. I'm not against helping people. It's a lovely thing to be able to do, but to be able to do it within the boundaries of what works for you is really good, and prevents you from slipping into being seen as somebody who'll just do anything. That can be quite dangerous, I think. If you have a small group, then you might choose to do it as a table discussion and get people just to talk to you and with you. Larger groups, it works well if you split them into groups and then get them to talk amongst themselves and to feed back to you after a few minutes. So this is the takeaway, you know. Are you saying yes because it's genuinely okay, or because you feel obliged? And to really get them to check the feeling they have when they agree to something, and to create a stall, you know, a buy me time phrase we sometimes call it, so that we don't have to say yes on the spot, and we can say, I might have something on, let me check my diary and I'll get back to you. or that sounds really nice, I'll check that, I'll let you know. So it's just a phrase that we can sort of pick up really easily. If we've already developed it in something that makes sense to us, then it's easy to pull out the bag when we are worried that we'll end up just saying yes all the time. So the third way that women give themselves their power away is to put themselves in a position of support. Now, we do that, actually, most of us do that so readily, and I think it's how we were brought up. We were brought up to, clear tables away after dinner and to help out and to help mum with the hoovering. I mean, that was my upbringing, similar to most other people's. But as adults, we fall into that role really quickly. So clearing up after people, playing the office mum, being everybody's chief organizer or go-to person. Now, if that's your job and you're really good at that and you love that, then go for it, because that's where your skill is. However, the risk is if you do that and that is not your actual job, that people rely on you to do that, and it puts you in a position of being not very powerful. If that's your job, then it means you're very good at your job, and it elevates your status because you have a reputation for being very good at that. If you're a PA to directors or something and need that element, then that's going to work in your favor. If, however, you are trying to build a career as being a really strong woman in a very difficult environment, or if you are trying to even have a very equal relationship with somebody where you end up doing everything and end up being their mum, that puts you in a position of devaluement, if that's even a word, but you know what I mean. So the risk is that you're teaching others to rely on you so much that you're labelled as the multitasker, or it's easy for you, she just does everything really well, or the administrator. People assume that you're happy to do that, and in a workplace it can even be, you have the reputation of being, not very good leadership material, and much better in a support role, which really limits what you're able to do. And I think you can unconsciously keep that bias going. So with your group, this is about taking 5 minutes to again discuss this. How did you fall into a support role, or how do you fall into a support role? Is it okay with you? That lovely question again. And how would it go down if you wanted to change your mind? So if you wanted to say no to things now, how would that go down? It's really interesting when you get a discussion on this. If you've got a small group, again, make it a discussion. If you've got a bigger group, you can do one-to-ones and then feedback around the table. But this is really about you mothering everybody to an extreme, which then makes you look like you're not the one making all the decisions and somebody else gets the credit for that, whether that's at home or whether it's in the office. And of course, the takeaway is to notice when you're doing that. Are you asking for help while you continue to do it? Because as long as you continue to do it, the help won't come. It's a very interesting thing when I see people, clearing up or putting things away and sort of looking for somebody to help them, or saying, could you just help doing this? But then you do it so quickly and so effortlessly, and you know how the system works, that you've done it before they've had a chance to learn it. So there's some onus on you to put a responsibility on teaching somebody how to be you, how to clear up as well as you already do it, so that you can step back from that. And also to think before offering. I've had clients that just offer to be on this board and offer to do that and offer to run this event and offer to do that, and before they know it, they've got so much to do, and people don't realise how exhausting it is. And also, what could you choose to let go of? If you really wanted to let go of something, if your audience was really thinking like, I absolutely see myself in this and I want to choose something to let go of, what would they let go of? It's really interesting. So this slide is about giving your power away by trying to future-proof your career. So I've heard a lot of young women in the past say, well, I can't take that job because that's not really going to work when I have children. Now, these girls that I spoke to back then, they didn't even have boyfriends then, let alone families. And for those of us who are a little bit older, we know that sometimes they never come and we never get married and we never have children, or sometimes they come much later, when we could have had a 20-year span career and then think about marriage and children. But what we find is that young girls and early 20s or mid 20s are stunting their career for a family that doesn't even exist yet. And the risk is that they're perpetuating that cycle that women will be the main carers, the main child carers. Now, if that's a choice, and that's absolutely okay to be a choice, but I don't want it to be an assumption. I want women to consider what might happen in 10 years' time when they have children, or who they might marry, or whether that person they marry might want to be the main caregiver. I want that to be as normal as what being the main caregiver for a woman could be perceived to be today. What it's also doing is assuming that their partners will be the main wage earner, and their partners may not want to be the main wage earner. There's a lot of stress that comes with that. We find that they perpetuate the theory that senior jobs cannot work around family, and actually that's sometimes just not true, because senior jobs, sometimes when you have a woman at the top who is working part-time, or she is job sharing, or she is leaving the job dead on 5 every night to go and pick up her children, or again, she might have family commitments too, but women are making those roles work. But by deciding before you have that family that you're going to debilitate your career because of that, it perpetuates that cycle. And 54% of women working part-time are employed below their potential. So those women have had their children, they've gone into the workplace part-time, and they are working below their potential. Now that's 2.8 million women not giving what they know they can give. And that's something that I would like to see much less of, because I want women, even if they're juggling children and career and jobs and their own interests, I want them to feel that they have the power to do that and to change that, rather than to fall into it. So your questions for your group are things like, who have you seen do this? Did you do that? Or maybe what part of you perpetuates that cycle? Is really a nice thing to think about and have a discussion over. And the takeaway for that is to bring up the topic if you have contact with younger women. If you see it, point it out, and ask questions around those assumptions. And what could you be asking yourself around this topic right now? So that might be something for them to consider and scribble away. Okay, so the 5th way that women give their power away without realizing it is when they become perfectionists. And they really go to extreme amounts of energy using power to keep the house really tidy and clean. That whole thing about having happy children, and they've got to excel in everything that they're doing and have the really good marks at homework, and they've got to be in a happy relationship, they've got to be financially comfortable, they've got to remember everybody's birthdays and become an attentive wife and mother and daughter and friend. My God, the pressure that puts on women to really just be perfect at everything. And it's kind of a society thing, it's everywhere we look that we pitch ourselves up against each other, and nobody really lets us know what's really happening, because in most households that's not happening. But we have this thing that we have to be really good at everything and perfect at everything, and it puts huge pressure on us. But not only that, others expect us to do it if that's how we train them to do it, right? And they see us doing these things really, really well, and they just assume that we can do it. But there's a point where every single woman thinks, I can't do this, enough is enough, or we start dropping balls, and then we start feeling guilty. And then we start thinking, I really need some help, and what's wrong with me? Why can't I do it? Why is everybody else doing a really good job at this? And 9.2 million women in the UK say that they're frequently stressed. Well, there's no wonder, is there? So this is about really highlighting to women that if this is something they go through and that they feel, then is it for them? Do they personify with that? Does the pressure to be perfect come from them or from other people? Just to get them talking about this topic. It's not necessarily going to change their minds, but it's about highlighting this very important thing. And the takeaway for that is just 3 things, done is better than perfect. Perfection is ever changing. It's just like chasing rainbows. And actually my perfection and how my bed is made, for instance, would be different to somebody else's perfection about how their bed is made. So perfection is an internal thing, and it changes obviously all the time as well. Replace anxiety around being perfect by concentrating on what is right rather than what's wrong. I think we very naturally go into that negative spiral of everything's wrong and this is wrong and everywhere I look something's going wrong. But if we can concentrate on what looks good, on what feels good, on what is good in our lives, then that can help that anxiety around being perfect. Okay, so tiara syndrome is really something from Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. And it's been used a few times now, and it's where women expect that if they keep doing their job well, someone will notice them and metaphorically place a tiara on their heads. We have this thing that if we just keep our head down and do a really good job and don't cause any fuss and just go with the flow and please everybody, that our efforts will be recognised and will be remunerated with pay and a pay rise and flowers and a box of chocolates to say thank you, and we're really going to get rewarded in that way. And the truth is that just doesn't happen. That's not how it works. You're much more likely to get ahead at work if you're being seen with the right people, if you're going to the right meetings, if you're hanging around at the right coffee machine, if you're talking to and networking with the right people. That false thing about working really hard actually doesn't do the job. But what we do is we produce our work on time, and we hope so much to be noticed and recognised. But the risk is we just blend into the background, we just become invisible, and nobody really notices what we do or don't do until perhaps we're off sick for a week or something. And then work piles up and people don't get things that they expected to get, and then perhaps they might realise what we do. But actually it's a bit late by then, and we don't really want to work around in that way to expect to be noticed, because that's not the way to do it. And the questions you can pose to your group are things like, who wishes someone would notice them? Might do a hands up, for instance. Can they see themselves in that? Do they take the responsibility on themselves to work really hard? Is that something they've been brought up with, maybe, if that's something that was put into them when they were by their parents or when they were at school? So that's really interesting to get this conversation flowing. And the takeaway is, just notice how much you do. And if it's too much, what would you like to drop? And then to tell somebody that you would like to drop it. That's the big thing. To ask, to delegate, to voice your concern, but to absolutely stop suffering in silence. Okay, so this is number 7. We are grateful, too grateful sometimes, and we really avoid asking for our real worth. So, women have this thing sometimes that they're just really pleased to be offered and considered for a major role or a major job or a promotion, and we're thankful, and we promise to do a really good job and to prove ourselves. What we don't like doing, of course, is looking too ambitious for fear of alienation, and we're often embarrassed about negotiating our pay. Women link pay to their value. So a woman would say, what gives me the right to ask for that amount? Whereas a man tends to link the pay to the role and responsibilities of the job, not his value. But we very much link our pay and our worth with our financial value. And we can't seem to separate that, and that's why I think we end up losing money where we could negotiate higher, because we really underestimate our real worth. But the risk is that we're easily fobbed off with a low pay. We're easily fobbed off with an excuse that we'll have a look at it in a year's time when you've proved yourself. A man often wouldn't work with that and wouldn't go with that. Women are seemed a bit more deemed as unlikely to challenge, or just not a very good negotiator. So when you get your women around the table, I want you to really talk to them about, is this you? Are you embarrassed to negotiate, or is this not you? And have you negotiated really, really well? And has there been a time where you have not displayed that being grateful thing and you've demanded more money earlier on. That would be really nice to hear those stories around the table too. And the takeaway is this afternoon, because you've got your top tips from top lawyer Natalie Reynolds on start, red herrings and trading, and they're going to learn a lot about negotiating and a lot about themselves actually, and how they already negotiate much better than they probably think they do. Okay, so this is number 8 on how women give their power away, and this one is, of course, imposter syndrome. So this is the feeling of being found out, being very uncomfortable with praise, and you might get a promotion or something like that, and just really don't think you deserve it. I mean, I had an award system that I was part of, the East of England Businesswoman of the Year Awards, and I coached one of the top winners. And she walked into my office. I was expecting somebody completely different because of her persona and her profile, and the first thing she did when she sat down on my chair was burst into tears, because she said, I did not deserve this award. People do not know that I'm not meant to be here. And she had such chronic imposter syndrome, but she absolutely deserved it, and she was really the head of that organisation. She just didn't match up her idea of her with what she was actually doing. So rather like her, she was attributing her success to, having a really good team about her, being in the right place at the right time, luck, that kind of thing. And the risk is that when somebody feels like that, they either hide. It's like a diversion strategy. It's like, please make me invisible. I really don't know that I want to be here. So they perhaps won't speak up in meetings, and that's how they lose their power. Or they go completely loud, because if they're so loud and so obstinate that people won't dare to look behind the surface to see if there's any real evidence there that they should be there. But then they get labelled as difficult to work with, you see, so there's no winning. But people end up believing that negative self-PR that most people with imposter syndrome splash about. And this can be in the home as well as the workplace. It's more prevalent probably in the workplace, but definitely it can be at home as well. So your questions for your group are things like, is this you? And have you ever felt like that? And maybe how you stopped feeling like that if they used to feel like that, or what they say to themselves now. So it's about 5 minutes of discussion. You can get them into pairs and bring them back to the table, but getting them to think about where they see themselves in here and what they could do differently. And the takeaway, of course, is we've got a whole lovely section on imposter syndrome this afternoon, including self-talk, dealing with the negativity, emotional lows, and thought cycles. So you're at the end of the table for this particular group before you go on to P&I 2. And this is just a chance to wrap up, really, to talk about all of those things collectively as a group, or either with individuals being in pairs. They can choose a question. They don't have to deal with all the questions. You'll be there all day. But these questions should be up on screen as kind of a prompt for them. So where have they given their power away before? Have they already stopped doing it? What do they notice other women doing? What surprised them about what they've heard this morning? And what's the first thing they think they might like to change? Because it's nice to really get a roundup before you move on to the next thing. And this is the next thing, interrupting the cycle. If we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. So we could choose to challenge 2 norms here and interrupt the cycle. And you're now about to explain little girl syndrome and the 18 to 30 realization. So introducing little girl syndrome, this is typically where a woman feels unable to speak up, perhaps where there's a dominant, often male figure. It's evident most notably when a lead figure at work or at home dismisses her attempts at interrupting or voicing her opinion or expertise. She may well react as she would have done as a little girl, shrinking back, keeping her expertise or opinions to herself, reverting to being quiet. And basically, if you've had a childhood where you've ever been belittled or quietened, then you'll be likely to put yourself in that box as an adult. That will be your default place to go. And, that's surrounding all types of things like shame and not deserving to be anywhere, not deserving to be in that place. Little girl syndrome is not reserved for those, meek, mild, really shy women. This occurs of women of all ages and seniorities and backgrounds, of all confidence levels, and it started in childhood. So these are the 10 most ways 10 most common ways to diminish little girls. Now, the whole thing about shush, don't interrupt, I've heard people say that to their children, and what they're actually saying is make yourself small. I want, never gets basically means don't ask for that. Children should be seen and not heard. Just shrink back and pretend you're not there. Don't answer back. That's really saying your opinion is not valid. And the most damaging, I think, sometimes is my word is final. That comes from a mother or a father, typically a father. But what it's saying to that child is, you have no power to make decisions. And for me, that's one of the most dangerous things to say to a child. Coming on to the next page, this is about, more of these, like stop showing off. What you're actually saying is no one wants to see how good you are. Stick to your promises, even if it no longer feels comfortable for you. And that's certainly something I would like to see changed, in terms of I see women now from my clients who are 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and they want out of a marriage, but they promise to stay there and to do a lot, and, they say things like, have I done enough? I promised. But it's okay to change your mind now as an adult. Be good, but it basically means be compliant, don't cause a fuss, just fit in. Put others first, be nice to others. Now, that's a nice quality, but what you're saying is your needs are not as important. I know when I'm talking to my little girl about being nice to others, I equalize it by saying, you have to be nice to you as well. You are just as important as other people. It's nice to be nice to others, but you be nice to yourself first. Saying no is not allowed, in some households. But basically what that means is you're asking them to stay quiet and do as they're told. But when you put that into an adult framework, that just doesn't work. And here's what we mean, so imagine saying those things to an adult. You really wouldn't do that, would you? It would be bizarre. And if you were to hear a husband say to a wife, for instance, be quiet and speak when you're spoken to, you would look at your friend with those eyes that say, she's in an abusive marriage, how do we get her out, But these are the things we say to really tiny young minds who don't have that voice yet. So why are we training little girls that this is how they should expect to behave? We're teaching them that they have no real power and that they should shrink back and put themselves second. Now, a new approach to parenting is emerging, and I'm seeing this more and more because I think the mothers that I'm dealing with, in their, as I said, their 30s and 50s, they're now thinking, I don't want my daughter to have the same upbringing I did. I don't want her to think those things about herself. So there is something called positive parenting, which is emerging. And this isn't about convincing anybody to parent their children differently, but it is about raising this as an issue and getting them to talk about it. So with this new approach to parenting, what women are doing now, and men, is making it safe for women, for young girls rather, to express themselves without the fear or guilt, telling them it's okay to voice an opinion. What do you think about that? That no expression of what they think is wrong, that it's just an expression of what they think. And as mentors, you can help to guide them and say, well, generally we would say this. But it's okay to have your own opinion and your own belief system, even when it's based in a 3-year-old's view of the world, or a 4-year-old's view of the world, or a 5-year-old's view of the world. We're teaching children to interrupt, teaching them how to do it, teaching them to ask, asking for her opinion and also valuing her no. So this is really important, I think, in our household anyway, is to stop when she says no to everything from tickles, hairbrushing to cuddles, and teaching other adults to respect her no is the work to be done, because their no is really important. Now, when you have a child whose no was respected, when she feels then able to say it and to enforce her no. Now, when she's 15 and in a compromising position, she's going to need sometimes to say no, and she's going to expect and want that to be validated and listened to. And those, I think, are the really important lessons for this new approach to parenting. So this is about discussion time, putting the questions up on the board and just getting them to think about this kind of topic. How did they relate to little girl syndrome? How, in their opinion, could we empower little girls, and what surprises them about this? And what impact do the messages that they received as a child currently have on their behaviour as an adult? That's a fantastic discussion. And the takeaway from this is really childhood conditioning no longer applies. You're an adult, you have a voice, and people will listen. You can say no, you can change your mind, you can break promises that no longer serve you. You have power. So this is the 18 to 30 realization. So that social conditioning that we get as children to do with good behavior kind of lies dormant, really. In actual fact, women are more likely to go to university to outdo their male counterparts and to see no gender difference at work. The women I've spoken to post-university at various networking events tell me that they are absolutely treated the same, that there is no inequality in the workplace. They can do what they want, they're gunning for promotions and everything else. Yet, they do question their future. So they are also telling me, how will I juggle my career and children? How will I be able to do my job part-time? Or will I be able to do my job part-time? They assume that responsibility without even questioning it. And, with a few female role models, many already put their boyfriend's career above their own. I have absolutely seen that in a young girl that I was coaching, whose boyfriend was in London and she was somewhere else, and she was not looking at her career prospects at all because she was following her boyfriend as he was following his career. So, well, I think I might move to London and then I'd be closer to him and I can just pick up something part-time, is what I heard. Now, this is a very clever, very, very clever, intelligent girl, and she was definitely at that point putting her brand new boyfriend of a couple of months above her potential career. And people's reactions to us in the workplace, and as we get to the point of getting engaged or getting married, compound all of that, of course. Some of my clients have overheard people talking about them in terms of, she'll be having children soon. She won't want to be traveling all over the world when she gets married. It's all really interesting stuff, but it's stuff that we hear peripherally and about us, and it really compounds to us that we don't have a choice. And here's the trap. So, having a career and family sometimes is really made too hard. It's a very male-centric system that we're still fitting into, and that needs to change. And whilst we cannot be responsible for changing corporates, we can be responsible for how we act within those systems to push from the bottom up for change. Because many women, especially after having 2 children, drop out. They take a junior role beneath their skills. They work part-time hours, which means a low-paid job. They're fallen into a support role. And that's giving them financial vulnerability, which leads to being grateful to earn even a small wage. So you can see how that cycle compounds. I did a speech in Brussels, and actually, no, it was Paris, and I had a lady come up to me close to tears. She had her back to the audience. It was when everybody was milling about and I'd finished. And she said, having 2 children, I heard what you said, and that really had an effect on me, because I'm thinking on Monday I'm going to have to go into work and tell my boss I'm going to have to go part-time, that I can't do it, it's too stressful. Having the 2 children, what do you recommend I do? And so I had this woman in front of me, and she's really, I don't know anything about her. I'm not in a position to start giving her advice. And I said that to her, but what I did say is, I would question whether your husband is having an equally difficult time juggling his job, and whether he is on the verge of saying to his boss he's about to go part-time. And she just stared at me in kind of shock and said to me, I haven't asked him. Is he having that much trouble with the stress? I don't know. So that was a question she hadn't even posed to her husband. She just assumed that she was the one that was going to have to back down. And I think that came with a lot of sadness for her as well, because of this lovely career that she'd built up. So it's a very interesting thing how there is a trap there, but we also perpetuate that trap. And new norms need to emerge, those old systems are no longer working, and they're certainly not working for women or men. The pressure on men to provide is just too much. The pressure on women to be the main caregiver is too presumptuous. Families are different now. We've got 2 women in families co-parenting. We've got 2 men parenting. We've got stepchildren on the scene. We've got children of all different ages and generations within families. It needs to change. People need to be flexible, and new social norms need to emerge. But they only emerge by us thinking about them and how it affects us in our lives. And as Sheryl Sandberg said, a truly equal world would be one where women ran half our countries and companies and men ran half our homes. Just the best line. Girls need to know they can break the mold, They need to know that they can use their voice, that people will listen to them, that they can maintain their identity and then trust their decisions. They can say no, that they have the ability to confront a difficult situation with power, and they know how to stand in that power. Their freedom starts with us, We are their role models. How we hold ourselves and stand up for ourselves, and how we trust our own decisions, how we use our intuition, that is all something they will copy, and they look to us. It's us that need to start that ball rolling and need to talk to children about how we stand up, how we hold ourselves, how we trust our decisions, and how we use our intuition, because we need to teach that to them in bundles. So here you are with your question board again, more for a prompt for discussion. What shocks you about everything you've heard so far? How are you losing your power, and what can women do differently? What questions are you now asking yourself, and what are the alternatives? So this is introducing what to do about imposter syndrome. The whole thing about imposter syndrome is really interesting, because women tend to judge their performance much more harshly than reality suggests they've done something, And men tend to judge their performance much better than reality. So I did some research for my 4th book, How to Coach a Woman. And in there I found Anson Dorrance, who was the University of North Carolina. He was a football coach in the 1970s. Now he was asked to head up the female football group club, which had not happened at that point. And he was asked to head it up and set it up, and he was really nervous about how did he need to react or behave differently to women and men. And all the literature at the time was telling him that women are feminists now, and there's no difference between men and women. So he tried to just do it the same. He tried to follow the advice he was given. But that didn't work, because what he realized is that when he came in at half time and he would discuss what went wrong out on the pitch, all the women thought internally that they were talking about them and what they had done wrong. Whereas when you talk to a group of men apparently about what they've done wrong on the pitch, they automatically assume we're talking about somebody else. And it really highlighted to him this difference of women putting themselves down so much more more freely, and not believing their worth and not believing that they deserve to be there. So that's a really interesting comparison. I've got 5 steps here to overcoming imposter syndrome. You've got just quit perfect, just start, honestly, because even if you don't believe you're any good at it, starting in your way with what you believe to be right and approaching a topic with how you believe it should be done, that's embracing your power. Think from your heart and just start doing it. To accept compliments, to say thank you and then just leave the silence that it's okay. And often with imposter syndrome, somebody says we have a nice dress or something, and the first thing we'll say is, oh, it was like £2 in a sale, you could get one too. But that really takes away from us so much, and we don't need to put ourselves down in that way. We could just accept the compliment that we wear it well, or that we look really good in it. And to be able to articulate 3 strengths about us, how many people can do that? And I would ask your group if they think they can do that, and you might like to do a quick exercise with them and say, well, let's take 5 minutes, write down 3 strengths about yourself, and then we want to hear it, and see how hard it is for some people to find anything good to say about themselves. To be able to vocalize 3 positive highlights about any situation. Now that's really good, especially in a workplace, because with imposter syndrome, people don't really want to divulge what hasn't happened very well because they don't want to be caught out, but actually that's the first thing they talk about, is what they haven't done well and what hasn't worked. And what they could be doing differently is saying, well, we've achieved this, we've done that, this has moved forward. And I think that's the difference between men and women as well, because they would be much quicker to say to people, that's worked, we're doing this, and we're on our way to achieving that. And then the next thing, of course, is noticing and reframing our negative self-talk, and we have 6 steps for that. The first step is to notice our stories. So these are the everyday ones, the he says, she says ones, what's going on in your life, what's your current hot topic. The tip is, when you tell your story of what's happening right now, how do you feel when you tell it? Do you feel excited, inspired, energetic by it, or do you end up feeling really cross about it and you go through the whole scenario again and you just feel really angry about something or devastated about something? It brings all the hurt back. I went through a difficult situation at the end of last year, for instance, and a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a long time asked me about it, how it went, and I hadn't been in that situation for months, and then I recoiled it and I found myself back in there feeling as dreadful as I did at that time, and that's really not healthy for anybody. So I think it's really important to notice our stories and what we're telling, and also to who, because there are people in our lives who feed off that drama, and they want to know the drama in our lives so that it gives them something to get their teeth into, or to say, you never guess what happened to her, or you never guess what happened to him. And we are in control of those stories, of how we tell them and who we tell them to. And I do believe that in the middle of any story, even if it's an uncomfortable situation, a distressing situation, there is always something to say that comes out good about that. And I would really focus on that. And the reason I would focus on that is because self-talk is stored. If you imagine your mind as that circle, and then halfway down it you've got your conscious mind one side and your subconscious mind the other. The subconscious is just non-judgmental. It accepts information into it without question. It just accepts information and files it. And it accepts all sorts of things, how you feel about yourself, smells that you've smelled, what you see, what you hear, what you think, what you say about yourself. So if you can imagine, that's like the hard drive on your disk. Every time you put something in there, you effectively open up a Word document and then save it. And it's not saying to you, the subconscious doesn't come back to you and say, Lynette, are you sure you want to say that about yourself? Because it's not the best thing you could say to yourself, It doesn't do that. It just accepts it as fact. And that's why when you then have to draw on something that's really good about yourself, it's really hard to find if the only thing you've put into your subconscious is things that are really negative. So at this point, I would ask your group what percentage of their subconscious is likely to be negative stuff or positive stuff, and the results will probably really shock you. I've had people saying that 99% of what is in their subconscious is negative, that they have put negative stuff in there. And you know, the world can be a cruel place sometimes, and I think we have to look after ourselves first. We have to be responsible for what goes in our subconscious, even if we're not responsible for sometimes things that we hear and what people say about us. We are responsible about what we say about ourselves. And I love this exercise. Meg and I put this exercise together when we were writing the book, How to Coach a Woman. This is how negativity impacts our actions, not our thoughts, not the ongoing thought cycles that we have, but instead our actions. And you would do this with your group. So rather than just explain the concepts of this, I would actually get them doing it with pen and paper. So the first thing we do is we write a negative, we always start with a negative thought at the top of the page. And then after that, you write down what action is taken as a result of that negative thought. And then what action is taken as a result of that action. And then what action is taken as a result of that action, which will bolster up very nicely your initial negative thought. So let's say that we do not believe there are any opportunities here. I coached a girl in a corporate once, and she says there are no opportunities here for me. So that was her negative thought. So I got her to write down her action. I said, well, what do you do as a result of that? And she said, well, I stopped speaking up in meetings. The next action was, I never searched the job board. And the action after that was, I just don't go out networking. I don't even bother, because I believe, going back up to the top, that there are no opportunities here for me. So I said, well, what if we turned that on its head? What if you did believe there were opportunities here for you? So she said, well, if I did, then I would ask for them. I would ask to be put forward for things. I would definitely search the job board, and I would make myself more visible in the organisation. Now, everybody knows that that's going to end up meaning that there are opportunities available for her, because she's putting herself in their way. So do the negative first and then the positive. Let them have a good go at doing this, and I would circle the room to make sure that they're doing it, because sometimes they find it very hard to distinguish between what thought happens next and what thought happens next, as opposed to what action happens next and what action happens after that. So go round and help them to craft that, and do it yourself. If you haven't actually done this as a facilitator, please go ahead and make a concerted effort to do it yourself. So this is that brilliant kinesiology test that we did on each other in the group. If you haven't done it since, go and practice on somebody. Go back to your notes, go back to your handouts, and remember what we did. The testee has to have their arm out. The tester then has to put an equal pressure on the wrist, only the wrist, so that they match their strength. And then you both put your arms down by your sides. And the tester says to the testee something like, imagine you're having a really bad day, everything's going really wrong, you're late for work, your boss is cross with you, you didn't get a very good outcome on a meeting. Just really paint a picture of things going really bad, and then test them again. Get them to put their arm out in front of them and test them, and you'll find they have no strength. And if you haven't done that since the training, then go and do it again, because it really is incredible. And then obviously end on the positive. Get them to do it again. Get your one person out from the audience and get them to do the positive again. And the positive is, you change your tone, you change everything about yourself. You kind of clap your hands if you want to, and just go, right, okay, so you're having the best time, so your voice is quicker. You change the energy and the pace of your language, and it really revs them up inside. And that means when you test it again, they'll be nice and strong. So, and then you get them to do it with each other. And remember, this can be chaos if you don't take control of the thing. So you make sure that everybody knows what role they have. They're in pairs. They know who's the tester and the testee. and you control the whole thing. You do the speeches so that you do the whole like imagination thing so that everybody's on the right page at the right time, and then you tell them when to test, when to put their arms down. You do everything. So practice on some people in your household so that you feel more comfortable to be able to do it in a group. It'll never let you down. It's fantastic. And this is about changing your perspective and what's your current hot topic. And you remember we went back to that before and talked about the stories, the he says, she says ones. Get them to really think about their current hot topic and how they could change their perspective on it. What is good about it? Why is it brilliant that that is in their life? Or why are they thankful that they have had this testing time? Get them to reframe it. Number 6 is their emotional ladder, which is actually from the book, The Emotional Guidance System. It's from the book Life is a Gift by Jill Edwards. And this is about thinking of your emotions as a ladder. So, you could wake up in kind of a good frame of mind and then somebody says something to you and your energy dips and you can end up at the bottom of the ladder. But, how far have you actually dropped down? Notice what thought or event caused that dip. And more importantly, ask yourself, what do I need to do to get back up? And there are 5 great ways to get back up. The first is called changing your state. So that's moving location, standing up, walking, running, doing something different. And most people don't know this stuff. So this is kind of new to them. Or most people think it's to do with NLP and life coaching. And it is a little bit. It's based in that. But actually changing your state is a really important thing for anybody to do if they are feeling sad or lonely or down or depressed. By changing their state, by going out, by standing up, by going into a different room, by doing another activity, it can change their mood very quickly. Listening to music, of course, we all know. Talking it out is a great one, we all know. To write, journal, read inspirational quotes. It is our responsibility to take ourselves back up. And of course, it's important to cry or feel sad and to honour that, but always come back up. So are you ready? This is again your slide to put up to your audience to say, let's ask some questions about you. You can get them into pairs doing this. This could take 15-20 minutes with 10 minutes feedback if you have time, or it can be a quick around the room if you don't have time. Who needs to support you and how? What 3 things could you do, and what 3 things are you actually going to do differently? So as I say, that's a full exercise in itself. It could take quite some time, or you could chunk it down to be quite a quick exercise. And finally, negotiation. Do you do it? With our lovely Natalie Reynolds from Advantage Spring. Negotiation is the most important skill in business and in life to get what you want, need or deserve. That's straight from Natalie. This slide is just a quick one to say, do you recognise this in you? Are you always grateful and not negotiating for yourself? Because this is how to do it. So when I researched this, I found some quite shocking social stereotypes around negotiating. Men are expected socially to negotiate for themselves. They respect male self-advocacy, but when a woman starts to do that, we should be more concerned apparently with others. And when we negotiate for ourselves, society kind of labels us as pushy or ambitious, and that's not a compliment. Out for herself, you'll hear those kinds of things. So as women, it's up to us to stop that cycle and to support women who negotiate for themselves, and also to be one of them. And it's no wonder, is it, why women shy away from negotiating when that's what it's about. And we're taught, but back to little girl syndrome, we're taught not to offend and to be grateful for having opportunities offered to us. But when we do negotiate, we don't aim high enough. So we've got a whole thing coming up on how to negotiate. But really, when we don't negotiate, it teaches others not to expect us to. It becomes who we are, but we can change that. So a little discussion for them. When was the last time they negotiated? Was it formal or informal? Get them thinking about it. Was it a family holiday they negotiated over, or the car, or a wallpaper or something like that, and how did they feel afterwards? What could they have said differently? And you might put an anecdote in or something for yourself on how you negotiated. You know, your experiences and your anecdotes are so important, flipped throughout this PowerPoint, in order to really connect with your audience and to be seen as one of them, you know, having overcome something and done it, or having found something difficult. So this is your discuss moment for your group. You can either put them into pairs if you have some time, or a quickie around the table just to get people's place of where they are and to see how they feel. So this is about START, the 5 successful strategies for negotiation. Here we go. S is for speak up. It's for ask, you know, state your case. 3 clear reasons why you should have what you want, and avoid waffling or starting with an apology. Really clear advice. T is for take it higher. Open extreme. Now we talked about this in the training. So open extreme means opening much bigger than what you thought you should receive. So say you think that you should get a £5,000 pay rise, for instance. You would start with 10 to 15% higher than that. And who goes first? You do. You're 80% more likely to get the deal if you open first. And also know your break point. Your break point is that point at which you would walk away, that it's not worth doing. Men are really good at that, and they're prepared to walk away if they don't get the deal they want, whereas women will tend to go down and down and down if they get pushed in that direction, just so that they come away with something. A is for adapt. Ask yourself, who do I need to be right now? And we need to be, you know, clear and assertive and strong and kind. We need to be all of those things, but you may need to feel like you embody somebody else for just that short time of negotiation. And I loved from the book Committed, Elizabeth Gilbert's quote, "My mother grew gills when she needed to swim and wings when she needed to fly." And it's really good. Women are really good at doing that. We have to be certain people at different times, and we're so good at embodying that. We should really embrace that. R is for rejection. Get used to no, and don't take it to heart, but if you must, grieve the no. You know, you can mind map it and journal and cry or talk it out, but for goodness sake, plan the yes. Get positive and reframe. Grow and move on. Just like Thumper said to Bambi, get up, try it again. And T is for think, you know, who are you negotiating for? If women negotiate for somebody else, they always get more. So remember, who are you negotiating for? It could be anybody in your family or anybody externally. You'd be much better at doing that. So try and imagine who you're negotiating for and what the point of it is. Obviously, by negotiating your salary, your boss also sees that you're able to negotiate for the company too. But you know, negotiating is about standing your ground. It's about saying, no, I'm not going to do that for that. I want this. And that's a really important life tool, both outside of work, in your personal life, and inside work. Now, I love this red herring. It's all the kind of things that you say, but you don't really understand what you're really saying underneath. So this kind of labels it, right? 10K, question mark at the end? That's too much, right? So you're really coming across as unsure at that point. I'm looking for kind of means, but I don't expect to get it. Somewhere in the region of, also says I'd take less. And if you want to reject an offer, you know, you don't have to have a plain out no. You can say something like that, something we can build on. I'd like to work on that. It's a really good way of rejecting an offer. And if you fail to start, then please trade. This is about, if I do this for you, will you do that for me? Trading is a really important skill that I'm teaching my daughter how to do, actually, but many of us were not taught how to trade. So this is a really great skill that I'm bringing now into the workplace for women through this course in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They were never taught to trade, and it's a really important key tool for them. So this is your recap. We've had all of these things. I would go through them, I would highlight them. It might also be a way to look at your flip chart as well and work out go through what they wanted from today and have a bit of a show of hands, because you should have crossed everything off that list, because I know that everything's going to be impacted. You know, confidence, self-esteem, how to be more forthright, how to set boundaries, that will all have come out in the discussion of today. So really have an enjoyable time wrapping up today. And then those two questions again, we want to see if they've moved. How comfortable do you feel describing yourself as powerful? And how do powerful women need to look, feel and act? And has it changed? So give them a few seconds to write their number down. They don't have to tell you, but a show of hands as to who's risen up in the rankings would be really nice. And also some feedback on, now they've seen and spoken about true power, how do they think women need to look, feel and act now? And is it different to what they thought at the beginning of the day? And this is back to your commitment to yourself. What 3 things will you do now differently? And to really impact that on your lovely H. How to use the bead to remind you of your journey, to keep it with you every time you see it, to have it somewhere on show to remind yourself of what you were going to do. And of course they can always buddy up with somebody in the group. It's kind of you putting them in touch with each other. I do it with a box, so I screw up their names and I get them to go around and take a name out of the hat. So of course everybody's going to end up with 2 buddies, because they're going to pick one, somebody else is going to pick them also. So it's about having contact with people after the event so that they keep on track. And then next step, now that could be continue to work on themselves using coaching or counselling. Today might have brought up some issues for them, or of course to book on your next follow-up workshop. So this is an opportunity for you to talk about your next one. And a thank you from me. Thank you for really being here today. Your presence really is the start of your journey. And I want them to take a few moments to fill in that feedback sheet, which you need to drop back to Kirsty. Without that, we really are blind and we don't know what a kind of an impact we're having on women, and we really need to know that. So please make sure they do that.